People often say to me, aren't they the enemy? Aren't they the other side? Why would you share information? We're not adversaries. We are there as problem solvers.
At the end of the day, we are all trying to help a cohort of people who have been through something awful and trying to get them an outcome.
Good afternoon. It's Lynda Reeves, Executive Manager of Employer Choice at GIO Suncorp. And today I have with me Lauren McKirdy and also Jeremy King. Today we are diving into something a little different, how collaboration, not confrontation, between insurers and plaintiff lawyers is actually making our workers' compensation and personal injury systems stronger. I'm really excited to have two incredible guests joining me. Lauren, would you like to expand on your title, a little bit about your role?
Thanks, Linda. So I'm the General Manager of the Resolutions Group at the Transport Accident Commission in Victoria. So that means I'm responsible for delivery of impairment and common law benefits, as well as dispute resolution and our in-house litigation services.
Thank you. And Jeremy?
I'm the principal at a firm called Robinson Gill Lawyers. But I also am the chair of the Law Institute of Victoria's Transport Accident Committee. And so in that role, and also previously in another role with the Australian Lawyers Alliance, I've represented plaintiff lawyers on a variety of forums that engage with the TAC.
Together, we're going to chat about what's working, what still is getting in the way, and how collaboration can build a fairer, more efficient system for everyone. So what does that mean, Lauren?
So our session that we're doing here at the PEEF conference is based largely around the TAC protocols, which is an agreement that was struck 20 years ago. We're just coming up to the 20-year celebration between the TAC, the Australian Lawyers Alliance and the Law Institute of Victoria. It's a set of procedures, protocols, around alternative dispute resolution. So how can we deliver compensation and dispute resolution without the need to go to the tribunal or to the courts? How can we avoid clogging up the courts and giving them the time back to deal with other matters that they need to spend their resources on? How can we get an outcome for clients as quickly and as efficiently as possible so that they can get on with their recovery journey? Have I put that correctly?
I think so, yeah. So, I mean, the idea really is that for everything up until litigation, up until you get to court, these set out how you do it. And the idea is to try and be collaborative. It's try to be open. The expression that we use a lot is all cards on the table face up. So you give everything you've got. TAC is supposed to give everything they have, and then you have an honest and robust conversation. And where possible, you try and resolve the issue at hand, whether that be an issue about someone's impairment or an issue about someone's entitlement to physiotherapy or someone's common law entitlement, which is obviously a significant payout. And the protocols have been incredibly successful and have certainly helped ensure that there is both clients can get access to benefits in an expeditious way, but also that the scheme can be sustainable and viable because it's ensured that costs are fixed. And so it's really made sure that that litigation costs have stayed stable over a long period of time.
Jeremy, you said pilot. And I was going to say, is this an aspirational goal of trying to get to this? But you said that there's a pilot that you've introduced to the scheme that you've been running your customers through.
No, it's not a pilot. So this has been going for about 20 years and it's been in various iterations. So it started in 2005. It was revised in 2016. And we've been engaged over the last year or two in revising it again. So along the way, there have been various different pilots of different things, but no, the protocols have been firmly established now for 2 decades.
So the protocols, we think, are a really great example for other schemes and other jurisdictions around how plaintiff lawyers and schemes or insurers can work together on trying to solve problems in order to deliver benefits or outcomes for clients, because these protocols don't always deliver a benefit to the client. The answer might be you don't have an entitlement or there's not sufficient evidence, whatever it might be. But getting to that outcome as early and as easily as possible is what's important. And to Jeremy's point around doing it in a really predictable way that enables us to manage the costs side of things and just minimise the impact on clients.
Yeah, so I like all the cards on the table, no surprises, because no one wants a surprise. We all want to know where everyone is heading and what we need to do to get there. So Tell me a little bit more about that. How do you introduce that?
Yeah, so I think it was quite a radical concept back in 2005 when it was sort of introduced. And to be fair to the TAC, that was certainly something that the CEO at the time was pushing pretty heavily about being open and transparent. But it makes sense, really at the end of the day, there's no point in holding back if you're going to try and successfully negotiate an outcome for someone, or if you're trying to get to narrow the issues in dispute. Because I think, as Lauren said, the protocols are not always about getting a result or an outcome. Sometimes it's that you can't agree and you need to go on to the next step, but at least you know what the issues are, you know where the fight is. And so when you get to litigation, hopefully it's been narrowed enough so that litigation can be efficient. Really great for the clients as well, because if you can reduce the time of litigation, that's also going to be great for clients. So I think the protocols have a number of things that they can do to really help clients. One is obviously, get them an outcome. But if you can't, hopefully you've got to a point by good information exchange, there are all cards on the table, that when you do get to litigation, you can run that litigation really efficiently and effectively because everyone knows what the issues are.
So one
Makes
thing that
perfect sense.
people often say to me is, so Jeremy and I sit on a number of stakeholder forums together, and we often have to work together to solve operational issues or more systemic strategic issues, come up with solutions. And people often say to me, like, how can you work with plaintiff lawyers? Aren't they the enemy? Aren't they the other side? What's going on there? And there's a real sense of why would you let them in? Why would you share information? So we've got a number of forums. We've got the Legal Liaison Group, which is chaired by our CEO, and we have a number of legal stakeholders who join us for that. And members of TAC's executive attend that meeting. We've got a legislative working group where we work together on legislative reform that can strengthen the scheme for future injured Victorians. We have a no-fault forum where we bring plaintiff lawyer reps together with senior leaders from our claims management areas to talk about improvements. What are lawyers seeing? What opportunities are there? What are we seeing? What can lawyers do differently to help people with their recovery outcomes? And we also have the protocols working group. So that came out of our 2016 revision of the protocols. We said we can't just let these sort of sit there for another 10 years. We need to be proactively coming together a few times a year to measure the performance of the protocols, make sure that they're delivering on the intent, and as we keep going, keep iterating, we run pilots, improvements. We have added to the protocols over the years. And now, as Jeremy said, we're in the process of optimising the protocols. So we're at the 20-year mark and we're saying, okay, we need to modernise them. Things have changed where we're working in a faster-paced environment, a lot more digital focused. How do we translate these 8 quite wieldy documents into something that's really easy to use and easy to navigate, particularly for younger legal practitioners who are coming through, but also our younger claims management staff who are operating under these protocols as well. We've been talking at the conference this week about professional standards for claims management staff and building the capability of the future and what's common amongst different schemes. And we think there's real potential. These protocols, I think, are a really good example of procedural clarity for claims management staff that gets them to the point of what is the issue that we're trying to resolve here. And then that's the bit where people need to come together and start talking. And that's what we're trying to enshrine, I think, in this iteration of the protocols. We're saying what we've observed over the last 10 years is because of the proliferation of digital communication, people have retreated to email exchanges. And there's it's hard to read tone in an email exchange. And when you've got litigators communicating with insurance employees, I think sometimes communication can break down digitally. Is that fair?
I think that's a good point. But also I think to your point you made before, Lauren, about how people within the TAC might say, why are you sharing this? It's because the protocols are also an agreement. They're not legislation. Yeah. And so they need buy-in from all stakeholders. And sometimes TAC are going to come to plaintiff lawyers and say, this isn't working. And if you then share the data as to why it's not working and allow us to then share that data back to our groups, we can then say, well, this is an issue. Yeah. And look, they've got the data to back up what they're saying. It might be about people not non-attendance fees for medico-legal examinations or something like that as an example. And we can take that back and we say, all right, what can we do to try and fix the issue? What can we do? But if you don't share the data with us, we can't then share it back with our group, and then we can't try and resolve the issue. So, I know it does take trust, and it is sometimes a bit of a leap of faith, but I do think the more TAC has shared in terms of data and information, the more that's allowed us to have really good, robust, meaningful dialogue and conversations about, well, what is this issue? And then we can say, all right, well, how are we actually going to try and solve it? What can we do on our end? What can you do on your end? And see if we can try and fix an issue that is terrible for everybody, like non-attendance at medico legal exams. That's a good example where we don't want people not going to exams. We want people going to exams. TAC wants people going to exams. And so you can have those honest and constructive discussions. What can we do on both sides to try and fix it? But if we don't know what the problem is and we don't have the data to back it up to sell it back to our members, then that can be a problem.
Yeah, and that's where we've really, I think, got past some roadblocks in the last couple of years, where we've been able to have evidence-based discussions around what the issues are and then come together to solve them. And we've got really different perspective. We've got different drivers. As an insurer, we're responsible for safeguarding the scheme. We're answerable to government, and then as plaintiff lawyers, they've got responsibilities to their client to get the best outcome for them. Professional obligations. So we've got different motivators and different accountabilities. But I think where we've had success is those evidence-based discussions. We say, right, here's the data. This is the actual experience. This is what is happening. Here are the emerging risks. What are our options? And that becomes our common ground and our common focus. So it's not about where the insurer, you're the other. When we're not in confrontation here. So we're looking at things at a systemic level, and trying to find ways to ensure that viability of the scheme for future injured Victorians.
Sounds like you've had a tweak to some of the language that you've used when you're communicating with these individuals.
Yeah.
So how did you get their buy-in on the protocols?
Yeah. So language is really, really powerful. And that is something that I think that I talk to people about a lot. Like all of this language around the other side, them. I imagine plaintiff lawyers have some language that they would use to talk about insurers as well. So when we come together to the table, we're not adversaries. We are there as problem solvers, and we have that shared goal.
And I think also we talk about this a lot actually, that it's also about shared clients. And at the end of the day, we are all trying to help a cohort of people who have been through something awful, and trying to get them an outcome. And that's something that I think took me a while as a lawyer to think about it slightly differently, which is that it's not about advocating for one client, which is what I'm used to doing. It's actually about advocating for a community. And if you take that lens on it, I think that's when usually you get the best results, I find. And I know that TAC, with all the conversations that we have at these forums, always take that approach. And I always think that's the right approach that we should all be taking. How can we actually help these clients get an outcome and try and get them through the process as fast as we can? And I think when we have those kind of shared goals, that's when it works. Also, I suppose having the regular meetings that we do, I think really helps as well, because it means you can sometimes nip things in the bud a bit quicker, as opposed to allowing it to fester and get worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's also when I think things can go wrong. If you're not having that dialogue, if you're not having that communication, if you're not having that regular communication, I think that's when things really can go south.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been in the past 10 years in particular, the predictability and the rhythm of those different forums. So everyone knows there is always an opportunity to raise issues, and there is a way to do it. And we work together outside of those forums as well. So we have subcommittees and working groups from particular ideas that come out of those forums. Then we'll appoint people to work on those solutions. But
Connections.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And that's something that we're trying to address. So in our current optimization work for the protocols, we're saying how how do we bring people together more? How do we put how do we reference the client more in the protocols? So the original protocols are very procedural and about what the lawyer will do, and then how the TSA will respond, and what we're all doing on an administrative level. But there's no real reflection of the client in there. So that's one of the things that we're really changing as well.
So how do we get these protocols across other schemes? Because this is what interests me most, having that framework in New South Wales, for instance, where, I operate.
Yeah. Yeah, there's huge
and what
advantages.
dreams are made of.
Yeah, because we resolve 80% of matters under the protocols. That's a huge benefit
I was going to ask
everyone.
you what the percentage was.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it's even higher in some areas.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, and dispute resolution would be higher.
And cost? What if the reduction?
So it's a fixed cost model.
Yes,
so
okay.
Depending on the steps, the resolution outcome,
Where it's
the
got
benefit
to and
type.
what's happened. Yeah.
But
But that fixed cost model, I think plaintiff lawyers recognise that it's very much a swings and roundabouts. So there's going to be some cases where you do a lot of work, and there's going to be some cases where you do less work, but it's fixed. And I think people accept that. But I think when you see the stats on what fixed costs has done for the scheme, it's good. It's encouraging because obviously plaintiff lawyers are very keen to make sure that we have a healthy scheme, and particularly have a healthy common law scheme. And by having things like fixed costs and the protocols, you can just see it flatline. You just see it staying nice and still, which is what you want. So I think the fixed cost part of it has been good. And also having that certainty. You can say to the client, this is what the TAC will pay here. And sometimes it might be this is what you'll have to pay on top of that. But having that certainty, to be able to give clients that certainty, I think is also very important.
Client, customer, what's their feedback?
By and large, they love it, to be honest. Sometimes it's hard though because they might only have one experience. Well, hopefully, knock on
have
wood,
anything to compare it to.
you don't have anything to
Hopefully,
compare it to. But when it works well, it works really well, and clients are very happy that they don't have to go through litigation, they don't have to go through court, they don't have to be re-traumatized, they don't have to go to multiple medical exams and tell their story over and over again. And I think all of the stats and all of the literature and everything says, and I can just say this from anecdotal experience, that also the faster you can get someone through the scheme, the faster you can get them sort of rehabilitated and on their way in life. And staying in a scheme on a long-term thing, I think, entrenches behaviour, and it's not really good for the client. So I think getting them through as fast as you can, people love that.
Yeah, and TAC, we have our own research that we've commissioned over the years that proves that. It shows that going through the compensation process can be really deleterious to someone's recovery outcomes. So what can we do to make that as have the least impact as possible so they can focus on the recovery outcomes? To your question around how can other jurisdictions take this example, I think something that's really struck me at the conference this week is that I think insurers are very comfortable collaborating with healthcare and medical professionals on solutions. I just see plaintiff lawyers as another key stakeholder in the system. They've got an important role that we can't ignore. So just as we collaborate with healthcare professionals, we should be collaborating with legal professionals.
For any other jurisdiction that's sort of trying to take on some of these bits about the protocols and ADR and stuff like that, I suppose my suggestion would be just try and do it bit by bit.
Yeah,
because obviously start small and try and build it up, because obviously, these things have been going now for 20 years, but it's been a journey and there's definitely been ups and downs along the way. So I think start small and try and build it up. Pick something that would work really well for ADR, like, I don't know, medical and life expenses disputes or physio disputes or something like that, and then sort of build it from there. It's going to be very hard to justify the cost of litigation in those sort of cases, but still very worthy for the client who really wants their physio or really might need that medical treatment. And so if you can find a way to try and resolve those disputes without having to go to a tribunal or a court, it's going to be in everyone's interest long term.
Because sometimes it is just that. They just want that component resolved.
Yeah, look, and there's a component of restorative justice here as well.
Yes.
Sometimes for the client, it's not the quantum of the benefit or the result for them. It's that going through a process, feeling they've been heard and understood. And I think the protocols meet that need really well. Yeah, but I completely agree with that suggestion. Start small, find something discreet, and build from there. Like, prove that it can work and give people that positive experience.
Your passion is absolutely unmatched. And I love the customer obsession. I think having them at the center of everything we do is key. Costs, great, but I love that you're both invested in the protocols and that you've worked very, very hard to ensure that there's no stone unturned. That, like you said, the cards on the table. Here it is. This is as honest as it gets.
Absolutely. And to Jeremy's point earlier, where he said they're successful because they're an agreement,
Yes.
they're not legislated, and it gives us that flexibility. So where Jeremy was talking about, maybe you could start with medical and like disputes as a discrete area. One of the improvements we're making to the protocols at the moment is introducing a new pathways or new triage basically for disputes. So previously every dispute lodged was treated the same administratively or procedurally, but we've brought in this trial where we've got fast track disputes for urgent issues that clients require a quicker resolution, and then we also have time limit disputes, so where clients are protecting their right to review, but they're not ready to proceed with the matter yet. They might need to collect some more information or get some advice, whatever it might be. By introducing those two streams, we've been able to really focus our effort and, as a government insurer, our resources on the right matters to get that quicker resolution for a client. And for the fast track matters, what we found is our control group in the past fast track, so issues like loss of income benefits, urgent surgery, what else is in there? There's a couple of other.
They're the two big ones.
They're the two big ones, really. So in our control group, they used to take over 200 days to resolve, and under the protocols, taking an average of 70, and some, under the new pathway, an average of 70 and some in as little as 40 days. That's fantastic. And I know that we also have anecdotal examples of issues being resolved on the day. That wasn't part of this trial, but it happens, and the protocols enable that to happen, because even though the protocols set out what each party should and must do, they also set out that each party can do whatever is required to expedite the process as well.
So is there a triage process for that fast track? Like, how does someone get to that?
Yeah, so it's just the way that the dispute is lodged on
Right.
the form.
Yep.
They click that it's going to be a fast track because it meets these
Okay.
criteria, and then it's
Yes.
allocated accordingly. And the first thing that happens in a fast track dispute is that the lawyer and the TAC get on the phone, talk about the issues.
But it's a good example of where the TAC clearly had issues with resourcing, which I thought were very understandable, saying, well, how do we resource all of these? How are we progressing them? We're having to do all of these work for a bunch of disputes that aren't time sensitive, and that's distracting us from dealing with the ones that are time sensitive. So how do we deal with that? And then on our side, we've got clients who might have had their income shut off and can't pay the rent, and so they need their issue dealt with more quickly so they can get a resolution on it. So that was one where it was sort of a win-win. And so I think when Lauren came to us with that suggestion and said, well, what about this? Why don't we do this triage method? Why don't we put it into streams? Everyone was like, well, that makes absolute sense in terms of resources. That makes sense in terms of clients getting, that urgent care and sort of attention that they need because they've got this crisis going on in their life.
Anything else to add before we wrap this up? Because I could talk all day to the both of you. This is very exciting for me, coming from outside looking in from New South Wales, and I want it now, right? In finishing, is there anything else that you would like to add, Jeremy?
I think the last thing I would say, it is you do have to check your ego at the door a little bit. As a lawyer, you've got to change your thinking on it. And I think once you do that and you approach it in a kind of collaborative spirit, and as I say, approaching it for a cohort of clients, not one client, and having that at the center of everything that you're doing, I think that's when it works.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, that is well said. What's the final thought that I would add? It's a tricky one. I think, taking ego out of it, I agree with that point. I think for insurers, we really have to look at the role of plaintiff lawyers in the system, accept that it's an important role for clients. They have a right to representation. They have a right to review. They have a right to pursue their benefits. So, just seeing them as an important stakeholder and treating them as such, and not looking at how individual issues are managed, keeping that strategic view is really important.
Pleasure to sit with you both. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Lynda.